We continue now at the top of Daf Samech Vav Amud Aleph Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 66a. On the previous summit, the Gemara said that when it comes to a chatas ha'of, you generally do the malika and you don't separate the head from the body. However, Rabbi Shimon says that if you do separate the head from the body, it is not a disqualification. And the Gemara is in the middle of offering another interpretation, another explanation of Rabbi Shimon. That Rabbi Shimon, he understands when it says in the pasuk Lo Yavdil, don't separate the head from the body, it really simply means Ein Sarich Lahavdil. It means that it's not necessary to separate the head from the body, but it actually is no problem if one does separate the head from the body by the chatas ha'of. Rashi explains, Ein sarich lahavdil, there's no need to separate. Hilkach, therefore, im hivdil lav shinoi hu. If he does separate, it is not considered to be a shinoi. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Ravacha berei de Rava le Ravashi. Ravacha, the son of Rava, said to Ravashi, Elamayata, but according to that, if lo yavdil just means Ein sarich lahavdil, there's no need to separate the head from the body. So gabe bor, when it comes to a pit, this is talking about a pit in Rosh Hashanah. Tichsiv, as it's written in the pasuk v'lo yechasenu, that it's not covered up, the pit is not covered up. We'll take a look at the full pasuk v'chi yiftach ishbor. If a person opens up a pit, o ki yichra ishbor, or if a person digs a pit v'lo yechasenu and doesn't cover it up, v'nafal shama shor o chamor, and then a shor or a chamor, an ox or a donkey falls in there. And we'll see the next pasuk as well. It then says Baal habor yishalem kesef yoshev levala v'hamesi alo. It says that the owner of the pit has to pay for the damages. And so the Gemara says again, Elamayata gabe bor dechsiv v'lo yechasenu. When it comes to bor, where it says don't cover it, hachanami de ein sarich lechasos. Are you going to interpret it the same way, that there's no need to cover up the pit? Is the pasuk saying that if a person opens up a pit and then he does not need to cover the pit? Of course, that's not what it means over there. So how does it mean the same thing? How does it mean over here, lo yavdil, that there's no need to separate? And the Gemara continues and says, Hachi hashta, what kind of comparison are you making between these two psukim? Hasam over there, kevan dechsiv, since it's written in the next pasuk as we just saw, Baal habor yishalem, it says that the owner of the pit has to pay. So so it's clearly upon him, he does have an obligation to cover the pit. But over here, michti, let us see, ksiv, it is written in the pasuk v'hikrivo, it says that he brings it. This pasuk is written by the olas ha'of. We'll see Rashi in a moment. But chilek hakasa bein chatas ha'of la'olas ha'of. The pasuk over here is making the distinction between chatas ha'of and olas ha'of, between the bird chatas and the bird ola. And so therefore lo yavdil lamali. So why would we need lo yavdil shma mina? So you see from the pasuk, what does it mean? It means ein sarich lahavdil. It means there's no need to separate the head from the body. And Rashi explains, michti, let us see, ksiv, it is written, again, this is talking about that it says v'hikrivo by olas ha'of, and the Gemara said chilek hakasav. The pasuk makes a distinction between chatas ha'of and olas ha'of, and therefore lo yavdil lamali. Why do we need lo yavdil? Rashi explains, ba'olas ha'of v'hikrivu. It's written by olas ha'of v'hikrivu. Uminon nafkalon Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. It's from there that Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon learns out havdalah ba'olas ha'of, the concept of separating the head from the body by olas ha'of, of cutting both of those simanim. B'hakol shochten. This is in hakol shochten in chulin. V'lo darash umolak v'hiktir kedarshinan la'el. He doesn't darshan the pasuk of umolak v'hiktir, which is darshaned earlier. Mahaktora harosh bi'atzmo, that just like the burning, the head is independent, the head is on its own, so too by the malika. Tetepuk le havdalah mehasam, that you should learn out havdalah, separation of the head from the body from there. Tahachsvara lesle, he doesn't hold of that. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon doesn't hold of that source. Sheyimlok eskulo, he says that you have to do the full malika. Eladavka rov shnayim, what Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon actually says is that you just have to do the majority of the two simanim. You don't have to do the full two simanim, according to Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. V'yalef lamikra, he learns that out from Sukkim. V'afilu rabbanon depligio lehasam. Now, even the rabbanon who over there they argue ikar havdalah ba'ola, but the main idea of doing separation by the ola, lo nafkalu ela mivihikrivo. They're really learning it out from this pasuk of vihikrivo. Demashma, because it's understood, this pasuk of vihikrivo hakohen el hamizbeach is understood that chilek eszem min hachatos. It's understood that it's saying that this carbon, the olas ha'of, is different than the chatas ha'of. Hilkach al karchach. Therefore, you have to say v'lo yavdil ha'amar bechatas lamali. Once this pasuk is already making a distinction between Ola Sof and Chata Sof, so why does it need to say Lo Yavdil? Kilomar Mai Ko Amarlon, meaning what is it coming to tell us? What is this pasuk saying? And so it must be Shma Mina that we see from here, Ein Sarich Lahavdil Kamar, that it really means you don't have to do that separation, but again, it would not be considered a deviation if that separation was done. Hilkach Nafkalon Ha'ola Mi V'Hikrivo, therefore V'Hikrivo is the source when it comes to Ola Sa'of, that Sarich Lahavdil, that it's necessary to do that separation, Da'achilik Beineyan, because again, there is that distinction between them. And Rashi explains, Di'iyaz Harahi Bechatas Shalo Yavdil, because if you're going to say that there's a warning by Chatas Ha'of specifically not to be Mavdil, not to separate, so then Hechi Nafkalon Ba'ola Mi V'Hikrivo, that Sarich Lahavdil, so then how would we be able to learn out from the word V'Hikrivo by Ola that there's a requirement to be Mavdil? Eino Muzar Shalo Lahavdil Hu, the Nafkalon Michiluko. All you could really learn out is that there's no warning not to be Mavdil, meaning to say, if there was a specific warning not to be Mavdil by Chatas, and we're saying that Ola is different, so then there'd be no warning by Ola Sa'of not to be Mavdil, but it wouldn't be a requirement to be Mavdil. Velo Shaton Havdalah, it wouldn't mean that there's a requirement of Havdalah, meaning to say, if all we're learning out from the V'Hikrivo is there's a distinction between Chatas Sa'of and Ola Sa'of, so if by Chatas Sa'of there was a warning that you're not allowed to be Mavdil, so all we would be saying by Ola Sa'of is that one is allowed to be Mavdil, but it wouldn't necessarily teach us a requirement. It's only if by Chata Sa'of that we're saying it's not required, Ein Sarich Lahavdil, so then we make a distinction by Ola Sa'of and say Sarich Lahavdil, there is that requirement. And Rashi continues, and the Shinuya Nuschos takes out the words Davar Acher over here because this is just an elaboration of what Rashi just said. Hai Lamali, the words Lamali over here in the Gemara, Kimo Maihi, that's like saying Maihi, meaning what is the purpose of the phrase Lo Yavdil. Again, Shinuya Nuschos has two other alternative girsas. It could be Mai Hai or Mai Ka'amar. In other words, that's what the Gemara means to say. The Gemara is just saying, what is this Lo Yavdil? What is the meaning? Lashon Katzer, it's just a shortened way of saying it. Mido'asa v'hikrivo l'chalik. And again, same basic idea. Since v'hikrivo is making a distinction between Ola Sof and Chata Sof, Lamadnu Havdalah ba'ola, and that's how we learn out separating by Ola. So Shma Mina v'lo Yavdil ein Sarech l'havdil kamar. It must be that by Chatas it's that there's no requirement, and by Ola there is a requirement. V'yashminan v'hikrivo d'chilek ba'ola that Sarech l'havdil. Again, v'hikrivo is teaching that Ola is different, that there is a requirement. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Mitzah dam haguf, if he squeezes the blood of the body. The Mishnah said that squeezing the blood of the body and not the head is still acceptable, but squeezing only the blood from the head and not the body is a disqualification, is not acceptable. And the Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Ola, it says in the pasuk, Ola afal pisha mitzah dam haguf v'lo mitzah dam harosh, even though he squeezed the blood from the body and not the blood from the head, it is still acceptable. Yachol mitzah dam harosh v'lo mitzah dam haguf. One might think, let's say someone squeezed the blood from the head and not from the body, that's also acceptable. Talmud lomar hu, the pasuk says, it says the word hu in the pasuk, and the Gemara says, my Talmud, how do we have this derivation? Why does that teach us specifically the dam haguf is the one that's acceptable, but if it's only the dam harosh, it's not? And the Gemara says to that, Amar Ravina says, mistabra, it is simply logical, the rov damim beguf shchichi, because most of the blood is found in the guf, so it would make sense, again, if we're going to say that one of them is necessary, one of them is acceptable, it would be the squeezing of the blood from the body that is accepted, even though one did not squeeze the blood from the rosh, from the head. But if the reverse would happen, if it would just be the dam harosh and not the dam haguf, that would not be accepted. Hadron aloch kodshei kodshim, we will return to you, parak kodshei kodshim. This is the end of the 6th parak of Meseches Zevachim. If you're enjoying these videos in this channel, please like, share, and subscribe, and take a look at the description box below to see how you can support this channel. And we will now begin the 7th parak of Meseches Zevachim. The parak begins with the Mishnah, Chatas ha'of she'asol lemata. If you have a chatas ha'of, again a bird carbon chatas, and the application of the blood was done on the lower half of the mizbeach, kimaisa chatas, according to the proper procedure of the chatas ha'of, l'shem chatas, for the sake of a chatas, kesheira, so then it's kosher, then everything was done properly. Kimaisa chatas, let's say the procedure of the chatas was done, but l'shem ola, but it was done for the sake of a carbon ola. Or kimaisa ola, or let's say the procedure of an ola was done, l'shem chatas, for the sake of a chatas. Or kemaisa ola l'shem ola. Let's say the procedure of the ola was done for an ola, and again, this is actually a chatas ha'of, so psula in these cases, it is disqualified. Asal lemalo, let's say he does it above on the upper half of the Mizbeach when it's supposed to be the lower half. So Kamaisa Kulan, so then any way that it's done, it doesn't make a difference. The fact that it was done above on the upper half of the Mizbeach, Psula, that makes it disqualified. And the Mishnah continues, Ola Sa'ov Shasa Lemalo Kamaisa Ola. If the Ola Sa'ov, if the application of the blood is done on the upper half of the Mizbeach, the way an Ola is supposed to be, the way it's supposed to be performed, L'Shem Ola, for the sake of a carbon Ola Ksheira, so then it's kosher. Kamaisa Ola L'Shem Chatas, if it's done with the procedure of an Ola, but for the sake of a Chatas, Ksheira, there also it is kosher. If it's just L'Shem, the other carbon, it is still kosher by an Ola. Uvilvad Shalo also Labala, it's just that it does not satisfy whatever requirement the owner might have. If there was a requirement there to bring this Ola, so then he would have to bring another carbon. Kemaise Chatas L'Shem Ola, let's say he does the procedure of a Chatas for the sake of an Ola, or Kemaise Chatas L'Shem Chatas, or the procedure of a Chatas for the sake of a Chatas, so then Psula, then it's going to be disqualified in this situation again by the Ola Sa'of. Asal Lemata, if he does the procedure on the lower half of the Mizbeach, Kemaisa Kulan, in any way that he does it, Psula is going to be disqualified. And Rashi explains, Chatas Ha'of Kemaisa Chatas. If he does it with the procedure of a Chatas, what's the procedure of a Chatas? That's Malika b'Simen Echad. That's doing the Malika with one siman, with cutting one pipe. V'Hazo Mitzoy, and then doing the sprinkling of the blood and the squeezing of the blood. When it comes to a Chatas Ha'of, there are two procedures done by the blood, the Hazo and the Mitzoy, the sprinkling and the squeezing of the blood. Kemaisei Ola, if he does the procedure of an Ola, the Gemara Mefarish Dashani B'mai, the Gemara will explain what deviation exactly the Mishnah is referring to. Asa Lemalo Kemaisei Kulan, what the Mishnah means, Kolomar means to say Kemaisa Echad Mikulan, in any of the ways described above, but he does it in the wrong area of the Mizbeach, he does it in the upper half, Ha'amur and Khan, all of the various procedures. V'afilu Kemaisei Chatas L'Shem Chatas, even if he does this Chatas with the procedure of a Chatas for the sake of a Chatas, but the fact that he did it Lemala is going to be a disqualification. Kemaisei Chatas, with the procedure of a Chatas, B'Gemar Mefarish Dashani B'mai, again, what was the deviation that the Mishnah is referring to when he does this Ola Kemaisei Chatas, and Asal Lamata Kemaisei Kulan, and again, if by the Ola so, if he does it on the lower half of the Mizbeach, with whatever procedure, Kemaisei Echad Mikol Elu, in any of the procedures that were mentioned above, Ve'afilu Kemaisei Ola L'Shem Ola, even if he does the procedure of an Ola for the sake of an Ola, but again, the fact that he did it Lamata is going to create a disqualification, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samech Vav Amid Beis.